Greetings from Las Vegas and welcome to the EOG Sports Hour. John Kelly with you on a Tuesday night. Glad to be representing EOG. The three letters stand for Ion Gaming. EOG.com, a website dedicated to the hearts and minds of gamblers everywhere. I'm glad the smart, sophisticated bettors are returning to EOG, and we've got two Ion Gaming contributors. They check into the main forum on occasion, who are with me tonight. Both Alan Dinkenson and ComptrBob to be heard on tonight's program. And not only are they friends, and I'm privileged to call them friends, but they're also sharp gamblers. Dink, based here in Las Vegas, ComptrBob living in Squaw Valley, California, site of the 1960 Winter Olympics. We'll ask Bob about his location there in Northern California / Northern Nevada. Dink, good evening. Welcome back to the show. You were at Saratoga, you were at Del Mar, and now you're back here in Las Vegas.
I was at Reseda for another trip. It was 3 trips. I think I was doing 28 days on the road and 4 days at home in the last month. So,
did you make money at the track?
Well, I have a T-shirt, and it's pretty expensive because it's cost me about $3,000 to get this T-shirt. So people say I wear cheap clothes. This is a $3,000 T-shirt.
You know, although for as many days as you were at Saratoga, the expenses can eat you up when you're on the road.
Yeah, the hotel's $180 a night.
$180 a night. Yeah,
it was expensive. Rent a car was everything was expensive.
So
food wasn't expensive. It was a lot of Hattie's fried chicken and Shake Shack for hamburgers. The harness track at night served good meals, too. So. What
was the most memorable race at Saratoga that you saw live?
Probably at Saratoga Harness when a pacer went 140. I'm going to get this from 147 and 4. It's at a world record on a half-mile track. That night, I can't believe I don't remember the horse, too. It was a horse that I thought should be the favorite, but I didn't think he'd wire the field, and he was just so pumped. You could see at the half he was going for records. And that was my most enjoyable part. The most memorable race for me at the Saratoga meet wasn't that memorable. It was like I was grinding a way ahead, and then I grinded myself back down. There were no scores. There were no near misses of scores. It was just kind of, I had a winner here or there, and I never hit a pick 3 or a pick 4, but I had enough win bets to cover me for a while. And then toward the end of the meet, I just never had something I liked and put my foot down on the pedal. I had one big play on one long shot who ran terrible, and I don't remember that horse's name. There was really nothing super eventful at that meet for me, but it was fun. I'm with a group of people with Paul and his family and his friends that I really like. So I'll be back. Next year, I heard, which is bad for vacation plans, is that they're starting early, around July 4th, and they're going to do 5 days a week instead of 6, which gives me 2 dead days at a place where I really don't know what to do on dead days because I don't golf.
That's the trend in horse racing, it seems. Pack more into fewer days.
They had a lot of full card 10 race cards with full fields. They really don't need that. I did a couple of days where they race off the turf, and 6 races, or 7 out of the 10 races were scheduled for the turf, and I made very small fields and pretty bad racing.
Travers Day, they had a monster handle at Saratoga.
I was not there, but they had the Whitney Day. I was there. I mean, they really. You can't sit in the backyard on some of these days without somebody sticking an umbrella next to you or something. It was wild.
Yeah, to bring people back.
It's nice to see support, and it's nice to see the type of people who go there, more or less deserve to be at a racetrack, as opposed to Del Mar, where they more or less to be at a rave or some party.
Yeah, it's a party. It's a place to be seen at Del Mar, where Saratoga, it's all about the horse. And they did a nice job, too, saying goodbye to 63-year-old Tom Durkin. He's been the voice of New York racing since 1990, the voice of the Breeders' Cup since its inception back in 1984. Saratoga bid a fond farewell to Durkin. They did it right.
Yeah, and he's a good guy, and he's fun, and he's really a truly great race caller, and he at times is very funny in his calls. And there's a good YouTube of his last call where they actually show the race and show him in picture-in-picture, and that's a lot of fun to watch. I suggest all race fans watch that one.
He coined a word, splash-tastic.
Splash-tastic. Add that to your EOG
glossary.
Yeah.
We've had a change at EOG. I think a change for the better, too. We'll talk more about that later in the week. I haven't published a code of conduct. I'm hoping that I won't need to. We want to get away from the obvious trolling and flaming and bullying and hate speech and all the nonsense.
I saw something that disappointed me today. A regular poster who I respect, I won't name him because it's not right to single out one, used the FAG word in describing something today. It was kind of caught me off guard because it's unlike him, but that kind of is borderline to me. People should grow up and realize that that's not a proper way to say sucky or something. That garbage. It's just that's pointing at somebody and saying that's just wrong. It's just wrong. Like I'll say retarded sometimes and I'll regret it, but it's more of a verb when I say it than a noun. So
yeah. I use the word queer to mean weird, nothing else. Language is a tricky thing, and the speech police is out there. We have a controversy in sports now with the Washington Redskins nickname. People want that changed.
That's just ridiculous.
Yeah. ComptrBob, welcome to the program. You're all about free speech, but there is a line that some people cross, and it's a dangerous line.
Hi, John. It's nice to be with you tonight, and hello, Dink.
Hello, Bob.
Yeah, I think I'm generally for forum freedom, but there's definitely a lot of phony drama and wasted effort and a lot of name-calling that goes on. I'm much more of the ilk of, attack the concept. Say a post is idiotic, don't call the poster an idiot. Sometimes I fail even then. I've been known to slide into some bad language, but yeah, I mean, I've always thought that the sign of an intelligent person is using language that's appropriate, not slurs.
Hear, hear, and I've been guilty on occasion of poor judgment, but I've cleaned up my act recently, so that's a good thing. And the word maggot, much better. You don't want to use that other word that we talked about, rhymes with maggot. You've got to be careful with what you say.
Is that a word allowed on the radio? Borderline word?
Our producer, Lawrence, I think, is giving us a thumbs up. But why use it, right? I mean, and it's about class on top of it. You just don't want to go down that road. And sometimes people use it for effect, and that's where it's tricky. You know what's interesting, Bob, is that, we're talking about a forum on the Internet, but the forums in general, what forum you use, what speech is important. Because I know on the comedy stage here in Las Vegas, almost anything goes. You can say anything you want, and it seems not many people are offended. So the audience, your audience, I think, is important too.
Yeah, I think, being as old as I am, I've seen generations of comedians. Back in the day, there was a comedian by the name of Lenny Bruce who had a few, what we consider now, very tame blue comments in his act, and was banned from various cities because of it. Then you get into the generation that saw Don Rickles, take kind of insult comedy to a new height. And I think it's unfortunate because I think true comedy is really some of the toughest performance art to be had. And the true comedians are really astonishing when they can relate to you, not just to insult you.
Very quick story. About 25 years ago, I'm in Southern California. My mother and father come out from Chicago. My mother, a devout Catholic, a daily communicant. She would attend church every single day. I took her to the comedy club on Sunset Strip in Hollywood there. I didn't know it at the time. People in the audience knew who he was because he was just starting out. And, my mother had no idea who was on stage. It was Andrew Dice Clay. And, needless to say, we lasted about 5 minutes in the show. Once he started with his hickory dickory dock rhyme, I knew Mom was going to head for the exits, and that's what happened. So, but I'm sure that happens a lot. And here in Las Vegas, too, there are some filthy comedians. Bobby Slayton, I think, is one. He calls himself an equal opportunity offender. And, I'd sooner laugh at the clean stuff. And it's a tougher comedy act to pull, too.
I don't mind the bad
clean
words. I just don't like the hurtful words. My favorite comedian ever, I think, was Buddy Hackett. I thought he was great. I mean, he dropped as many F-bombs in the show than anybody else, but they weren't directed at people. They were just used as words to accentuate what he was saying.
I saw Sarah Silverman last year. She was outstanding.
Mm-hmm.
She's funny.
She's pretty funny.
Yeah. So.
Well, you had a guy, too, that really put it all in a capsule, and that was George Carlin with his 7 words that you can't say on TV. I mean, I thought, to me, he is one of my favorite, if not my absolute favorite.
He's a very cerebral comedian, and those are the best kind.
And he got in big trouble here in Las Vegas late in his career. Remember, he was at the MGM Grand. My friend Bill O'Brien was in the audience that night. He shocked a lot of people with what he was saying. He was talking about the tsunamis, and the worse the disaster, the better. And, I don't know if he got booed off the stage. I believe the MGM Grand fired him, from the contract. But he was just, extremely offensive that night.
That's not really like him.
No, but that's the way he turned out that night. And, he is a smart comedian. Bob, something about George Carlin when he's not swearing, he's, the fact that he can, talk about everyday things and talk about what a lot of people don't talk about. He thought at a very high level.
Yeah, and I think, too, there's a kind of an element to push the envelope among comedians. And we've seen with the demise of Robin Williams that true comics do not always live a very peaceful and serene life. They're somewhat troubled. So I remember George Carlin from the days where he did Al, the hippy-dippy weatherman. Really benign, but just hilarious stuff.
I saw, talking about troubled comedians here in Las Vegas, I want to say it was late 90s, New Year's Eve at Bally's. They put up a big production. Sam Kinison had 2 shows that night. We went to the early show. He didn't make it out of the first 5 or 10 minutes when people started booing, calling for a refund. He bombed out of his mind. I don't know if it was alcohol or drugs or what, but Kinison, it was a nightmare. And, Bally's had a refund tickets, refund the money, for all the tickets that were bought. So you're right, Bob. These comedians, they lead 2 lives sometimes. And Dink, back to gambling, we see that with gambling too. Sometimes the pressures of gambling, people can't handle everyday life. Stu Unger's a good example, the founder of Ion Gaming. Ken Whitester. Gambling gets to be too much. I've had a sick amount of story. I've got a sick amount of stories of gamblers in this town who came and were destroyed by gambling. A friend of mine, very sad story, killed himself in Oakland. He swam. He decided to take his life. He swam out in the Pacific Ocean to never return again. How about that as just a disastrous story? But comics...
Was that because of a gambling debt?
A gambling debt. I mean, he couldn't take it and checked out. And, we see that at times. Bob was talking about comedians being star-crossed. I think we see that in the gambling world, too.
It's interesting, a choice of ways to go. Swimming to your death.
Some say it's euphoric. I mean, I've seen it.
How would you know they're dead?
Yeah. They say it's I guess that in the final minutes, it's like a release.
With them and go and riding a little boat next to them. This is great. I'm gonna die. Bye.
The psychology of suicide. I don't even like to talk about the topic. It's so dark. But it is real life, especially here in Las Vegas. I'm guessing the suicide rate here is a lot higher than other cities per capita.
I think Seattle has the worst one, and it's attributed to the lack of sunshine and the rain.
Yeah, I've heard that also, being a Seattle native. Especially people that aren't used to the rain. I think if you grow up there, you get used to it. But it's really, some months it's really foggy and cloudy the entire month, and you have to really get used to it.
You're listening to the EOG Sports Hour. John Kelly with both Alan Dinkenson and ComptrBob. Sidetracked the first 15 minutes.
Now, we didn't even talk wrestling.
That's right.
We talk suicide instead.
Some would say that is a suicide, watching a wrestling.
Oh, stop it. It's great entertainment.
Quintessential Pro Wrestling is Dink's promotion, and there's a card coming up a week from this Saturday. It's September 13th in the Las Vegas Roller Hockey Center. We'll have all the details on that promotion later in the program. We're going to go commercial-free on tonight's show. No commercial breaks whatsoever, thanks to the suggestion from EOG contributor 50 Cent. So, and we'll have time for...
Who might be at the Quintessential Pro Show.
That's good. How many people are you expecting at your wrestling promotion?
About 4,000. Maybe about 127. That's the number I have in my mind. 127 is the over-under.
Is that what's the break?
Paid.
What's the break-even number, if I may ask?
250.
250 would get you even. Tickets at
Smart businessman, I am. Huh?
Tickets are $18 in advance, $20 at the door.
Very pretty girls who work really hard and are very athletic, unlike the WWE very pretty girls who don't work hard and are completely unathletic.
How many girls are on the card?
8.
And how many matches all told?
10.
So it should be a fun night. Doors open 7:30. The first bell is 8 o'clock. 953 East Sahara Avenue. We'll be talking about that promotion every night on the program up until it goes on September 13th. ComptrBob, you are not a supporter of professional wrestling.
No, well, not really, no. I kind of gave it up, I think, when I was in maybe 7th or 8th grade.
Who do you remember back then?
It's going to drag you into this conversation.
No, I never really got suckered into the...
It's very different, the show that I run and the show that you watch on TV. Mine is a very athletic endeavor show as opposed to, a lot of talking and nonsense that you see in WWE. It's a completely different show.
Yeah, I remember there was one guy, the Iron Sheik.
He's still alive and still talks the same way.
And, that's another, back to what we were talking about before, using words in the right forum. At the stage, you talk about stereotypes in wrestling. I remember growing up, the stereotypes were out front. They had the evil German guy, Baron von Raschke.
And the gorgeous George gay guy, they were all out there. Mm-hmm. There was a million evil German guys, most of them who turned good later in life.
Also, sneaky Asians. I remember a lot
Japanese,
of
Japanese, Tanaka, Mr. Fuji.
What Japanese wrestler did not throw salt?
That's right.
About sports betting, ComptrBob, you have a little explaining to do from last Tuesday night's appearance. You gave us 4 plays. 3 of the 4 were unsuccessful.
Yeah, I usually will post a postmortem on EOG of what I did right and what I did wrong, but in this case, what I did wrong was heavily outweighed what I did right. And the one winner that I did have was Temple over Vanderbilt, and no way that I thought that they would destroy Vanderbilt the way they did. So I got off to a good start with that game and then proceeded to take 3 fairly large favorites who decided really not to show up in their particular games.
Too bad you didn't have action points with Temple. You should have got paid a little more than 11 to 10.
Yeah. I did at the last minute make a money line bet. I think I got like plus 330. Typically on a lot of the first week, they don't put up money lines until the line
opened 17, and you took a money line on something that was plus 8.5. Did that kind of? I don't think I can do that because of all the missed value. I know you recommended the bet, I think 14. Now you weren't taking a money line that was worth plus 14 points, right?
Well, no, I recommended 13.5.
Right, which was
great
because the line closed 8.5. But what money line did you take? The one that was at 8.5?
Essentially, yeah, it was.
That's kind of
plus 330.
I would have rather taken more plus 13.5 then, and that's why the first week of college, if you're going to be right, I think you have to bet early, And if you're wrong, you have to question what you're doing, because anybody who laid 17 or 14 on Temple has to start questioning what they're doing.
On Vandy, you mean?
On Vandy.
Yeah.
Which brings me to another question. People thought Vandy was going to be terrible this year, but not quite that terrible, because they, the line was 8.5 and it opened higher. How do you view Vandy from now on? They can't be overrated anymore, because they were so bad on TV that, it's very hard to quantify just how much to lower them in your ratings. That was god-awful. The only points they scored was on a muff punt by the other team.
Oh, I know, yeah. It was... no, that's an excellent question, and it's the same question, really, of how bad is South Carolina, who was touted, a double-digit favorite over A&M, and got blown out as well.
I think you wait to the second week and see if South Carolina does pretty good. You upgrade A&M, and if they do bad again, you might downgrade A&M. I think that you learn more from the teams that you played. Like if Temple comes out and beats another team by 28 points when they weren't supposed to, maybe Vandy isn't quite as bad as all that. But if Temple gets blown out by whoever they play, then you really could almost say, I could never bet Vandy. And I hate not betting the teams that are the worst teams. I hate to look for spots against teams that lost by 42 the week before. So I'm just trying to find a reason to bet Vandy now, even though, it's hard to say, boy, they were terrible. I can't wait to bet them. But
yeah, it's hard to find a reason. I think both were, in my mind, so disgusting. Vanderbilt, I had a hunch was going to be small and was going to have a trouble tackling, and that turned out to be the case. But South Carolina acted like a bad high school team. I mean, they were giving spacing to A&M that was unbelievable in a high-level college football game. They couldn't tackle anybody. Those are things that you really can change in 1 week. So it'd be a while before I would bet Vanderbilt or South Carolina.
You would look against them more than you would look on Temple or Texas A&M.
Yeah. I think Temple, to me, the key to that bet was they had experience coming back. They had really played a very competitive game against Central Florida last year, against a very good quarterback. And I look at that when I'm looking at week one of the next season, who really kind of has momentum, because Temple stunk the first part of 2013, and they started playing better. And I would look to Temple now if I thought I would get value. I think because A&M, it was so impressive against such a highly rated South Carolina team, I think Texas A&M's value is going to go through the roof, so I'm not sure there's value.
There was a weather alert, too, in that Temple-Vandy game. Maybe that was part of the move as well.
I think that was much people thought it would just be a complete bog, similar to the Florida-Idaho game, which was eventually suspended. But
And that total was right around 49-50 in that Vandy-Temple game. As far as what to do with Vandy and South Carolina moving forward, two SEC teams that threw in stinkers at home. The market's not so sure in week 2. Vanderbilt is home to Ole Miss. Pinnacle opens Ole Miss 20, and that's where the number currently sits. With South Carolina, they've got a home game against East Carolina. Steve Spurrier's team favored by 16.5 at the open, and that, too, is where it sits. One difference between South Carolina and Vanderbilt, Bob. South Carolina has its coaching staff in place. Spurrier's, he's in his 10th year in Columbia, whereas Vanderbilt, they were making the switch from a outstanding James Franklin, someone who's getting a lot of publicity of late. He's now with Big Ten's Penn State. Derek Mason took over for James Franklin, and Vandy looked disorganized. They've got a first-year offensive coordinator and a first-year defensive coordinator as well, and we're familiar with that offensive coordinator. If you're a supporter of Pac-12 football, Carl Durrell. His name rings a bell. He used to be the UCLA head coach.
Yes, and probably one of the more stupid coaches I've ever seen in the Pac-10.
How do you get a job in UCLA if you're a stupid coach? That's kind of hard to believe.
That was an affirmative action type, similar to Tyrone Willingham at UW.
Tyrone Willingham landed on his feet. I hear now he is part of the selection committee. He's going to be
right.
He's going to be one of the 13 members that select the 4 teams in college football. For some reason, he wasn't very effective on the sidelines at Washington and Notre Dame, but he still has respect, I guess, among college football administrators.
Yeah. Well, Carl Durrell was incredibly stupid at UCLA.
Hey, you're not supposed to say that. You're supposed to say you're not supposed to call people idiots and stupid.
Yeah. Well, I reserve.
Inept. Let's use inept. He was incredibly
inept. He's not
inept.
posting at EOG. When he does, I will amend my statement to say he did some incredibly stupid strategic moves.
Okay.
What about your moves, Bob? Last Saturday, we talked about the winner, Temple, good call, but the 3 losers, pick those apart if you would quickly. We'll move ahead to the action for tomorrow. Bob is going to have 2 baseball plays to make amends for the 1-3 record from last week, but we're not afraid to talk about losers on this program. Bob, where did you go wrong with the 3 losers?
Yeah, well, in fact, I think I learned a lot more from my losers than I learned from my winners. But I think going into probably the game I was most disappointed in was John Kelly's alma mater, Northwestern, to allow Cal to get off to a 24-7 lead and rack up more than 400 yards of total yardage. It's just mind-boggling to me, and I have to completely reassess my opinion of Northwestern in that game. They got outstatted. They really got outplayed. Towards the end, in kind of panic mode, they played much better, and actually they had a chance to really come back and at least tie up the game. So I was mostly disappointed in Northwestern. That game was just, I completely mishandicapped it. I could not believe. Actually, the quarterback for Northwestern, Trevor Simeon, had a fairly decent game, but he threw a couple critical picks, and it just didn't seem like they had any fire. In the 2 other games, I had Florida State.
Could I stop you and I want to say something about Northwestern?
Sure.
I thought they were even worse than that because I thought it was they were in a second half comeback mode where the other team was lurking to. We don't really think we go. We're amazed that we're here and we're going to run the clock out and we're going to give back yards on it. If you want 8 yards of play, you can have it. And they got a tremendous amount of home team calls in that game, Northwestern. It was the California coach was like pacing the sidelines and shaking his head back and forth. There were an awful lot of calls that were very questionable that went to Northwestern. So I would actually think that score is not indicative of just how bad they were outplayed, because when both teams were trying to score and not protect the lead, I thought Cal was so dominant over Northwestern.
Yeah, I would agree. In fact, Northwestern only got called for 1 penalty in that game. So.
And Northwestern this week, Bob, they are at home against Northern Illinois. There is money in the market for the Wildcats. Northwestern opened 5.5 at Pinnacle, up to 7 even money right now at Pinnacle. But, boy, the market did not like your play on Northwestern, Bob. You laid double digits last Tuesday, and that number was closer to 7 than 10 come kickoff time. Yeah,
and in fact, I think I posted that the market definitely crapped on that play. And the market was right. It was just a mishandicap on my part. I think he can right the ship at Northwestern, but because I think generally the Big Ten will be down, but it's going to be a struggle when you lose at home to a team like Cal, and as Dink said, not just lose, but really get dominated for 3/4 of the game. It's just, to me, it would be very difficult to motivate the kids. after that loss.
Your Florida State loser. Seminoles up 17-0 early. I thought, hey, this Florida State team's going to be rock solid once again this season. Not that they can't be down the road, because the schedule is certainly easy, but they were disappointing because Oak State got right back in the game.
Yeah, exactly. And at the end of the game, Oak State had a shot at, again, tying it up. What surprised me there, I thought Florida State might sputter a bit on offense because of rust and losses to of some of their receivers. But what really surprised me was Oklahoma State's ability to move the ball. And Oklahoma State lost probably as much as any team in Division I in terms of graduation. They really had to, reconstruct their offense, and just did an amazing job. Never gave up. The stats were pretty even. Florida State gained about 100 yards more, but first downs were 23-22 for Florida State. Oklahoma State had much better third down efficiency, and really made it a game. Had a total of 161 net yards rushing against Florida State. That just really surprised me, and I think it just means that Florida State is not going to be. They're going to have a very easy schedule, and they're really, especially with Clemson and Miami of Florida not necessarily being the powerhouses they have in the past. I think they played Notre Dame as well, and other than those 4 games, they don't really have much. Florida State may be a good team to bet against, because if they go undefeated, they'll undoubtedly get into the 4-team playoff this year.
Right, and of course this year now, instead of like last year where you win 1 game, you win the national title, Florida State's going to have to win 2 games against likely quality opponents, so that adds a different layer to the handicap.
I watched Clemson. They were unbelievably bad in the fourth quarter, like amazingly bad. They became like a high school team.
Well, they made that Georgia back look like the next coming of
Herschel
Emmitt
Walker.
Smith, or some of the great running backs out of Georgia.
Right, Herschel Walker comes to mind, the great MMA fighter.
That's one thing we see in college football, Bob. We see teams collapse in the second half where they're just not going to get stop the rest of the game. It's something of a phenomenon where they're just either they're gassed from what they did earlier, but you're just confident that they're not going to get a stop when they need it.
Conditioning, the program of conditioning. That's important now in athletes, and you can't see that with projections of who's returning and who's not returning. They were gassed. Clemson was horrific in the fourth quarter. About as bad a fourth quarter you can play in a game that was close and even and projected to be somewhat close and even. It was every play. I mean, I happened to be eating in a barbecued restaurant before PWG, and there was a Georgia alumni meeting, and I needed Clemson's. I mean, these kids yelled. I mean, they were 25 to 30. They recent grads. They yelled at every play, and when it got really obnoxious when they started blowing them out, and they were yelling at every tackle or every incompletion that Clemson threw. It was hard to enjoy my meal.
Bob, to complete the postmortem, you also played your alma mater.
Yeah, and that was another disappointment, although I knew in the Washington game that, Hawaii is somewhat of a difficult place to play because you've got the kids that are treating it as a vacation. And from what I'd read, and I spent quite a bit of time reading Twitter feeds on Washington out of, interest in my alma mater as well as trying to get a bettable edge. The line somewhat favored both my play with Florida State, that went up a little bit, and the play with Washington, that went up a little bit from the 17 that I recommended. But Washington played well, but always found a way to keep Hawaii in the game, and I really was impressed with the way Hawaii stuck to it, and really almost pulled the game out. Obviously, only losing 17-16. My takeaways there are that I think Chris Peterson still has some work to do with the Washington squad, the skill players. Lindquist, Jeff Lindquist, was really the backup quarterback, and he started due to a suspension to the starting quarterback. But both of them are relatively new, having to replace Keith Price from last year. So I think Washington will still be a good team, but based on that performance, I'm definitely downgrading them, and a slight upgrade to Hawaii.
And that quarterback for Washington who missed the opener, Siler Miles, he will be probable for this Saturday's game against Eastern Washington. No numbers available in the marketplace on that game just yet. Bob, do you have an early feel for what the number might come? Washington home to Eastern Washington?
Well, in the past, Eastern Washington has been a fairly good Division I AA. I refuse to call these teams FCS and FBS because I always have to think about which is which. So I just call them Division I AA. But Eastern Washington is out of a small town in Eastern Washington called Cheney, and they have a unique field similar to Boise State, except theirs is red, and they very often get to the Final Four in the 1AA tournament, which is a playoff, single elimination playoff football for the title for Division I AA. I think just offhand, I would say probably the number is going to come around anywhere from 17 to 20, but I might be on Eastern Washington if it does come that high.
I heard Kenny White at the Westgate handicapping seminar talking about Washington's front seven. I think he said it's the best defensive front seven in the country. EOG contributor Woodrow Wilson got a chuckle out of that. He thought Kenny was using hyperbole to make a point.
Yeah, I think that is wildly over-optimistic.
You know, Pac-12 defenses, they're up against it against some of these fast teams in the Pac-12. I mean, defense is secondary, it seems, in the Pac-12. It's all about scoring points.
Yeah, I mean, there's a few teams that do focus a lot on stopping some of the really run and gun. Stanford has done a really good job on defense, especially against Oregon. And Oregon is a lot of it is a complete run and gun. In fact, the old Oregon, when Mike Bellotti was coaching Oregon, their defensive coordinator was called Nick Alawalati instead of Alawat. I can never pronounce his real name, but I just kept because when Bellotti started, the Oregon defense was really terrible, and one of the reasons why he would put emphasis was just to outscore people. And of course, UCLA back in the day, a lot of times they would win in these high-scoring shootouts. USC the same way.
Arizona likes to run up and down too, with Rich Rod at the helm. And there's a correlation there too, Bob. Those high-scoring offenses, they put a lot of pressure on the defenses. I know time of possession is not a big stat in college football. In fact, you could argue with the quick strike offenses that are out there, especially like Oregon's.
It's the other way around.
It's the other way around, correct? But what happens a lot of times with the defenses is they're spent because they're having to spend so much time on the field.
Yeah, right. And I think with the college game, the length of the games lengthening out because of commercials and whatnot. I think a lot of the kids don't wear down as much as in the old days, where you really, in fact, it's very telling now if you look at the scoreboard for games that all start at like at 9 o'clock. All of the MAC games and the non-televised games seem to end about 10 or 15 minutes before the other games, and because there's so many timeouts and commercials and whatnot. So I think the new kind of run-and-gun offenses like Oregon do put a real stress, especially if they're effective, in moving the ball on their defenses, because say you get a couple of first downs, but you've only burned 2 minutes off the clock, and you put your defense out there against a team that can really grind it out. And I think that's really why Stanford's been able to match up well with Oregon over the last 3 or 4 years.
You're listening to the EOG Sports Hour. John Kelly with Alan Dinkenson and Computer Bob. Bob talking about Stanford matching up against Oregon. Stanford, I've always thought, kind of a Big Ten team disguised as a Pac-12 team. The Rose Bowl was interesting last year when Michigan State beat Stanford. It was the Big Ten against the Pac-12, but really almost 2 Big Ten teams there. And that might give us a little help in handicapping the Michigan State-Oregon team. If Michigan State's a lot like Stanford, maybe they can hang with the Oregon Ducks. A little money's coming in on the underdog Spartans. I love what Mark D'Antonio does with that MSU program.
Right.
And right now, Oregon is a 12-point favorite at home against Michigan State. So we'll see where that goes. Bob has a couple of baseball selections for us on tonight's program. We'll hear what Alan has in terms of gambling recommendations. We're going commercial-free on tonight's program. It's the EOG Sports Hour. I'm John Kelly, your host. A loser tonight in WNBA basketball, Phoenix 96, Minnesota 78. Tip of the cap to Heim. He'll be on the program tomorrow with Bobby the Owl. Heim has Phoenix at odds of 7.5 to 1. I saw the ticket to win the WNBA title. Drock also has Phoenix too at a slightly lesser price at 7 to 1, but still
it opened at 10 to 1 at William Hill.
Did you grab any of that, Bob?
I grabbed none of it.
Unfortunately, because Phoenix from here, it looks like a layup that they'll win the WNBA championship. Indiana and Chicago, they play tomorrow. I'll have a selection in that game later in the program. But college football was the discussion on tonight's program. It's kind of been a depressing show because we went from, we just talked about Bob's 3 losers from last Saturday. We started with the suicide notes.
My losers at Saratoga.
Your losers at Saratoga, yeah. And we're going to find some winners, though, maybe in the last 10 minutes.
There's no such thing as a sure thing. Except if it's EOG.
Or your wrestling promotion.
That will be a fun event.
It will. A week from this Saturday, September 13th, Quintessential Pro Wrestling. You can follow that organization on Twitter, twitter.com/QProWrestling. It's only $18 in advance, or $20 at the door. I'll be there.
You'll get your money's worth, and it'll be much more exciting than the Mayweather fight.
And that's taking place on the same night. Mayweather going up against Maidana in a rematch of a fight in
10
May.
to 1, he'll win. He'll run most of the fight, and he'll win every round. There it is. Mm-hmm. Come to my show.
Well, you can also tell us.
My show's more unpredictable, and I know who's going to win.
Oh. I was going to say, you can tell us what's going to happen at the QPW show, too.
Might throw you a swerve.
John, there's one thing that I would like to say. I did make a couple of in-progress bets that helped balance out my losers.
I want to ask you a question about live betting, because I thought of this. A lot of people live bet for middles. And I understand that why that's good, and if they got a good feel for it. If you have a team, I'll give you an example with a baseball thing. If you bet over 7 on a baseball game and you score 2 runs in the first inning, are you inclined to bet under in the live betting now to find yourself a middle, or do you have to do you only pair up live betting with live betting to do middles?
No, I think you can pair up, an initial position that you took potentially. I think it really depends on how you read the game, because there's sometimes where that 2 runs is indicative of
bad pitching or something.
Going to go out of control, yeah.
Yeah.
And the bookmaker is not going to give you much with just 2 runs in the in the first inning. He may bounce the total up by a half a run.
Really? I would like to go over every time if I get 2 in the first inning, because that's 1.5 more than anticipated. If it only goes up a half a run. I'm just thinking out loud. I don't really do that much live betting because there's a little extra vig, and I have enough trouble beating the 10-cent baseball to attack the 24-cent baseball. But that seems like a small adjustment to me. I mean, I know if you get a 0, it goes down a half a run, but 2 in the first inning is much more positive for the over than a 0 is for the under.
Yeah. Well, it kind of depends if you're in Colorado and the total is 10.5 or...
Well, you still get 2, which is not... Yeah, I mean, 2 is cheaper in the higher totals than the 7s or the 5.5s with... But then with 5.5 with Kershaw, you have a pitcher coming in who can shut down the game.
Right, and it depends if Kershaw gives up the 2 runs versus the other guy goes in.
Well, it's really hard to make these numbers because there's a lot of factors into them.
Well, actually, I know an example. I read Palm Tree's website, and usually I don't bet his picks.
Which has been fortunate of late, but bad But at the beginning of the season, he was on quite a roll. So he's a smart guy.
Yeah, and he had 2 under 7s, and one was, I think, the Marlins Mets game. Eventually ended up
100-72.
Yeah, it was 7-6 or 9-8 or something.
I'm guessing without knowing that the other one was Oakland Seattle. Was it? That's kind of his style.
No, I think they were both afternoon games.
Okay.
Yeah, I could go to the website, but the other one was a similar game. Yeah. And I was somewhat tempted to bet under. Oh, the other one was the Pirates in St. Louis.
Okay.
And they were both totaled at 7. He both liked both the unders, and the Pirates. St. Louis lasted till about the 8th inning when I think St. Louis tied it up 4-4, and eventually it ended up 5-4. So
more losers on tonight's show.
Yeah, we're talking about losers.
Now it's going to.
We should get to tomorrow's winners. I had one other question because somebody who handicaps baseball that I respect a lot told me the importance of using fan graphs. Do you use fan graphs?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, they have good stats, and particularly about the quality of pitching.
And line drive percentage is a good stat.
Right, there's a lot of stuff in there, I think. I just really need a lesson on how to find it and how to use it conveniently instead of trying to remember how to get the pictures uploaded, period.
Yeah.
So I'm waiting for somebody out there to offer me a fan graph lesson. I will get you have free tickets to my show.
Another QPW promo. So
I tie it everything. Buy me lunch, come to the show. Come to the show.
Computer Bob, you're going to try to make amends from last week's performance. You're going to be on the show this coming Friday. It's Computer Bob against Railbird in what should be an interesting promotion for Ion Gaming. Birdie doesn't seem to lose these head-to-head matchups. He's been outstanding in years past. Computer Bob to tackle Railbird this Friday. They'll go with 7 games apiece, pro games or college games, sides or totals. May the better man win, or the better handicapper that weekend anyway. And one thing I do like about the format, Bob, 7 games, pro or college, sides or totals. There's something about that format. 5 games, not enough. 9, 10, 11, too many. It seems like 7 with a full board in front of you, sides and totals. There should be no crying about the result.
Yeah, I agree. I think since the inception of the Stardust Invitational way back when John Kelly came up with that format, I've kind of liked it. Its simplicity and it's a good sample. It's not statistically significant. There's a lot of very good handicappers that have gone 1-6, and a lot of guys that didn't know how to handicap have gone 6-1. But it's a good sample.
About 5 minutes remaining in tonight's program. We've gone commercial-free. This is the EOG Sports Hour. John Kelly with Alan Dinkenson and Computer Bob. Bob, you've got a couple of plays off tomorrow's baseball card. Dink, what do you have for us?
I have a play in tomorrow's baseball card as well.
Very good. So we'll hear 4 selections all told. I'll sneak in my WNBA play in the final minute of the show. Bob, your 2 selections.
Okay. Well, my first one, I thought I might be lining up with J.K. if he did a baseball selection, but it's to back the Cubs and Kyle Hendricks, a young pitcher who's come up and had a reasonable amount of success with the Cubs. I think Palmtree mentioned that last week that he thought the Cincinnati Reds had pretty much quit, and I tend to agree, although I don't think a team goes out and absolutely quits, but there's a difference between giving maybe 80% and giving 100%, even though these are professionals. The Cubs are minus. Oh, I'm sorry. The Cubs are playing the Brewers. And I was thinking about my next game. The Brewers obviously haven't quit, but they've been absolutely in the tank since they had an incredible start. And tonight, in a game, they got beat 7-1 by the Cubs. So I like Kyle Hendricks against Garza. Hendricks will be laying about minus 101, and Rizzo is probably out for the season. Starlin Castro twisted his ankle. He's the starting shortstop for the Cubs, and he's going to be questionable for tomorrow. But even so, I like the Cubs.
Milwaukee will be without Carlos Gomez.
Yeah.
He injured his wrist tonight, so Hendricks will have an easier time.
For, the Brewers.
So betting number 912, Cubs over the Brewers. That's the first of 2 plays from Computer Bob. Your second selection deals with that interleague game.
Yeah, and I kind of gave it away. It's Baltimore against Cincinnati. Baltimore is really on a hot streak. Baltimore and the Angels are definitely the 2 hottest teams since the All-Star break in baseball. And they're starting a guy, Gonzalez, for the Orioles, who's kind of an under-the-radar pitcher. Miguel Gonzalez has some really nice stats, really honed his game after the All-Star break. A lot of times I'll break up a pitcher's record, before and after the All-Star break and look for differences in performance, both good and bad. And he definitely has a good one. The Cincinnati pitcher, Axelrod, is kind of questionable. He's knocked around. Darren Axelrod has knocked around. Originally came up with the White Sox, had about a 5.5 ERA, was down in the minors, and the Reds brought him up when Homer Bailey went on the DL. So I definitely think there's a pitching matchup. The Orioles are laying minus 155, and I think that's quite a reasonable price.
2 home teams, the Cubs and the Orioles. We'll check back tomorrow night, see how Bob fares. We'll open the program with a recap of Bob's 2 plays. And again, Computer Bob wheels back for us on Friday to go head-to-head with Railbird. Think your best bet.
Mine's a total. It's under in the Anaheim-Houston game. I really like the Houston pitcher. Another pitcher who's under the radar is McHugh. Really good stats for the whole season. It's pitching well now. Angels have their ace. As good as the Angels have been lately, hot, they've been their pitching has improved to me more than their hitting. They're still not hitting that well. Trout is coming out of a slump, but the rest of that, Hamilton a little bit, but they've still got a long way to go before they become a pitching-oriented team, and I don't think they'll score that much. I don't think that Weaver will give up that much, and The total is kind of a little above par total for that stadium, so to me it should be below it.
Under the total of 8.5 in the American League game between the Houston Astros and LA Angels. My WNBA play quickly. I like Indiana at home -3.5 over Chicago. The 4s are popping up at some of the sharper offshore spots. Plenty of 3.5 still here in Las Vegas. I like the Fever over the Sky. Go ahead, lay the 3.5. I'll trust Tamika Catchings on her home court with Lynn Dunn as head coach. For Alan Dinkenson, for ComptrBob, I'm John Kelly. Thanks for listening.
Good luck.